experience. When people hear that I'm 40 and I've never had a relationship that lasted more than 5 months, they often tilt their head with that mix of curiosity and concern. Some wonder, experience, what's wrong? Others think, wow, you must be so free. But what fascinates me is not the judgment, it's the story behind it. Because being single at 40 isn't just a relationship status. Experience. It's a lens, a way of navigating intimacy, independence, desire, and belonging in a world that often measures success by longevity rather than authenticity. Tonight, I want to take you inside that lens. Experience, not to justify it, not to apologize for it, but to explore what it reveals about how we love, what we expect from connection. Experience, and what it means to write your own script when the world already has one waiting for you. When we think about success in love, most people instinctively look at time. The longer a couple has been together, experience, the more we assume it means something is working. Anniversaries become milestones not just of survival but of validation. 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, these numbers hold a kind of social power, experience, as if longevity itself is proof of intimacy, depth, or happiness. But when we begin to look closer, this equation doesn't always hold. We all know couples who have stayed together for decades out of habit, experience, fear, or resignation rather than love. We know marriages that endure in silence with no connection, no playfulness, no vitality, yet they are celebrated simply because they last. So the question arises, experience. Is time truly the best measure of love's success, or is it just the easiest one to track? When someone says they have never had a relationship longer than 5 months, experience, the cultural reaction is often shock or pity. The implication is that something must be broken. But what if those 5 months were intense, honest, experience, and transformative in ways that many 20-year marriages never achieve? What if those brief connections carried more vitality than relationships that drag on without aliveness? Experience, duration, and depth are not the same, yet we often confuse them. We glorify stability and permanence because they fit into our collective idea of security. But love is not always about security. Experience, sometimes it is about discovery, intimacy, vulnerability, and the courage to enter and exit with truth. The emphasis on longevity comes from a world that craves certainty. Experience. Humans are deeply uncomfortable with endings. When something doesn't last, we call it a failure. But why? We don't consider a meal a failure because it ends. Experience. Or a song less valuable because it lasts only 3 minutes. We don't measure the worth of a summer romance by its ability to survive the winter. Love, too, has seasons. Experience. Some encounters are meant to be fleeting yet profound. They can mark us, shape us, teach us, and even transform us without needing to last forever. Experience. To recognize this is to expand our definition of success in love. Experience. To make room for multiple forms of intimacy rather than forcing everything into the mold of forever. It takes courage to see relationships as experiences rather than as trophies. Experience. A relationship can be brief and still be meaningful. It can be unfinished and still be complete. It can end and still be considered a success. Experience. But this perspective runs counter to the cultural script that tells us that unless a relationship leads to marriage, children, or a long-term partnership, it doesn't count. The idea of serious relationships is almost always tied to duration. Anything shorter is dismissed as casual, as if brevity strips away seriousness. Experience, as if passion has no gravity unless it stretches across years. This narrative diminishes not only the people who live outside of it, but also the real intimacy that can happen in shorter spans of time. Experience. The question then is not how long did it last, but what was its quality? Did it awaken something in you? Did it expand your sense of self? Did it allow you to love, to risk, to play, to connect? Experience. Did it show you a part of yourself you had not yet met? If it did, then why should it be considered less valuable than a relationship that simply endures? Endurance can be an achievement, experience, but it can also be inertia. We should not mistake longevity for vitality. A long-lasting relationship can be full of love, but it can also be full of avoidance, fear, or complacency. Success in love is to shift our lens from the external markers, time, status, labels, to the internal ones: intimacy, growth, authenticity, play, eroticism, and mutual recognition. Experience. It is to acknowledge that some of the most meaningful encounters in life may never appear on the official scorecard of relationships. They may not result in anniversaries or public recognition. Experience, but they leave traces that are no less real. In fact, they may be the very experiences that allow us to bring more of ourselves into the world, more ready for connection, more open to love. Experience. The tension between freedom and longing is one of the great paradoxes of human relationships. On one hand, we crave connection, intimacy, and the warmth of being known. On the other, experience, we fiercely protect our independence, our ability to move through life unencumbered, to make choices without compromise. These two desires are not opposites, but they live in constant negotiation. Experience. To be fully free often means to risk loneliness. To be fully connected often means to risk constraint. Most of us are not trying to choose one over the other, but rather to dance between the two. Experience. To find a rhythm where freedom and longing can coexist without canceling each other out. Being single at 40 sharpens this paradox. Experience. Society tends to frame freedom as youthful adventure and longing as mature responsibility. In our 20s, we celebrate independence, travel, career, exploration, spontaneity. These are markers of success. Experience. 40 freedom is often recast as avoidance, as if the refusal to settle is no longer a sign of vitality, but a symptom of fear. Longing, meanwhile, is treated as the noble goal, seriousness, the readiness to finally grow up. Yet, the truth is far more complex. At any age, freedom can be expansive and enriching. Longing can be both nourishing and suffocating. Experience. Neither loses its relevance just because we cross a certain birthday. The experience of short relationships is often where this tension reveals itself most vividly. In the first months of intimacy, experience, we get to experience the sweetness of both. There is connection, the thrill of being desired, the joy of discovering another, the tenderness of being seen. Experience. And yet there is also freedom, the lightness of not being weighed down by long-term obligations, the permission to live fully as oneself without yet folding into another's patterns. Experience. These first months are intoxicating precisely because they hold freedom and longing in balance. We taste both without yet being asked to sacrifice one for the other. But as time stretches, experience, the dance becomes more complicated. Commitment asks us to limit freedom in order to deepen connection. Promises and expectations emerge, and with them, experience. A subtle fear that we may be losing part of ourselves in order to gain the other. For some, this transition feels natural, even necessary. For others, it feels like a quiet erosion of vitality. Experience. The question is not whether one is better than the other, but how we navigate the constant negotiation between autonomy and intimacy. Too much freedom, and we drift. Too much longing, and we suffocate. Experience. Culturally, we have not done a good job of honoring this tension. We idealize the merging of souls, the couple who becomes each other's everything. Experience. The story where freedom is joyfully surrendered in exchange for permanent love. But this ideal often leaves little room for independence, individuality, or erotic aliveness. Experience. Esther Perel often reminds us that desire requires distance, that the erotic thrives in the space between two people rather than in their fusion. To preserve freedom within longing is not to undermine love, experience, but to sustain it. Being single at 40 means living inside this paradox in a very particular way. Freedom is abundant. You wake up in a bed of your own choosing. You make decisions without negotiation. Experience. Your time and energy are yours to direct. There is exhilaration in this autonomy, a richness that many people secretly envy. At the same time, longing still lives within you. The desire to be held, experience, to be witnessed, to share life in companionship does not disappear simply because freedom is delicious. It is entirely possible to feel grateful for autonomy and ache for intimacy at the same time. Experience. To acknowledge both is not to be confused, but to be human. What becomes important is not the elimination of one for the sake of the other, but the ability to live in the tension. Experience. To recognize that freedom and longing are not mutually exclusive but mutually necessary. Freedom gives us the space to grow, to explore, to maintain our sense of self. Longing pulls us toward others. Experience expands our emotional lives and reminds us that we are wired for connection. The art of love, whether it lasts 5 months or 50 years, experience, lies in holding these two desires together without reducing one to the enemy of the other. Experience. Challenging cultural scripts about relationships is often less about rejecting love itself and more about questioning the narrow ways we have been taught to define it. From a young age, experience. Most of us are handed a template. You meet someone, you fall in love, you commit, you build a life together, and ideally you stay until death do you part. Experience. This script is so deeply ingrained that even those who resist it often feel its weight. It shapes the way we interpret our own choices, the way others perceive us. Experience. And the way society judges what counts as a meaningful life. Yet when we look at how people actually live, desire, and connect, the reality is far more diverse than the script allows. Experience. Being single at 40 is one of the clearest ways this gap between the script and reality becomes visible. The cultural narrative tells us that by midlife, our relationship trajectory should be established. Experience. We are supposed to have accumulated milestones, marriage, children, perhaps even divorce and remarriage. To stand outside of that timeline is to be cast as an outlier and often as a problem to be solved. Experience. People ask with concern, why haven't you settled down? Or when will you find the right one? As though there is only one story worth telling and any deviation must be explained or corrected. Experience. But what if the script itself is the limitation, not the people who don't follow it? Scripts offer us comfort because they reduce uncertainty. They tell us what is expected. Experience. They reassure us that we are doing life correctly. They make us legible to our families, friends, and communities. Yet these same scripts also silence the complexity of human experience. They do not account for the fact that love may come in bursts rather than lifetimes, that some relationships may be deeply fulfilling without fitting into traditional categories, experience, or that autonomy and intimacy may coexist in ways our language barely captures. When we cling too tightly to the script, experience, we risk dismissing genuine experiences of love simply because they do not look the way we were told they should. The cultural script also tends to measure worth in relational terms. Experience. A single person at 40 is often treated as incomplete, as though their individuality is not enough without the anchor of partnership. But perhaps the question should not be why someone is single, experience, but why we are so uncomfortable with the idea that wholeness can exist outside of a couple. This discomfort reveals more about our collective anxiety than it does about the individual's choices. Experience. We live in a world that fears solitude, that equates partnership with safety and status, and that pathologizes those who choose or find themselves in other arrangements. Experience. Challenging the script does not mean dismissing the beauty of long-term commitment. It means widening the frame so that love is not only validated when it fits into one predetermined mold. Experience. It means acknowledging that relationships come in many forms and lasting, conventional and unconventional, romantic and platonic, monogamous and non-monogamous. Each of these forms can be rich, alive, experience, and meaningful in its own right. To insist on only one definition of success in love is to diminish the fullness of human connection. To live outside the script is not always easy. Experience. It requires resilience against misunderstanding, curiosity about one's own desires, and courage to affirm value even when society offers little recognition. Experience. It also requires the ability to see beyond the comfort of categories. Some of the most profound connections defy labels. They are neither friendships nor romances in the conventional sense. Experience. Neither temporary nor permanent, neither casual nor serious. They exist in the in-between, in the spaces where human connection resists tidy classification. By challenging cultural scripts, experience, we reclaim the authority to define our own experiences of love. We refuse to measure our lives by timelines we never agreed to. We open the door to more nuanced understandings of intimacy, experience, ones that can honor both the fleeting and the enduring, both the traditional and the unconventional. And perhaps most importantly, we grant ourselves the freedom to live love as it unfolds. Experience, not as it is prescribed. Embracing authenticity over conformity is one of the hardest and most liberating choices a person can make, especially when it comes to relationships. From childhood, experience, we are taught to adapt, to follow rules, to play by the expectations of family, culture, and community. We internalize models of how love should look, how a relationship should unfold. Experience, and what milestones we should achieve by certain ages. To conform is to belong, to diverge is to risk judgment, misunderstanding, or exclusion. Yet when we silence our authentic selves in the name of belonging, experience, the connection we gain is often shallow, conditional, and unsustainable. Authenticity requires courage precisely because it exposes us. It says, this is who I am, this is how I live. Experience. This is what I want, even if it does not match what the world wants for me. At 40, never having had a relationship longer than 5 months, experience. Authenticity means owning the truth of that experience without apology. It means refusing to reduce your story to a problem, a failure, or an unfinished project. Conformity would say that something is missing, experience, that the only way to validate a life is through the stamp of long-term partnership. Authenticity instead asks, what have these experiences meant to me? What have I discovered about myself, about intimacy, experience? About the dance between closeness and independence. What truths have revealed themselves in the pattern of my life that would have remained hidden if I had forced myself into the mold of convention? Experience. Authenticity also means embracing contradictions. You can be deeply independent and still long for closeness. You can value freedom and still ache for touch. Experience. You can enjoy the novelty of beginnings and still wonder what it would mean to build something lasting. Conformity demands clear answers, neat labels, and a single narrative. Experience. Authenticity lives in the messier truth that humans contain multitudes, that desires evolve, and that one can feel seemingly opposite things at the same time without being incoherent. Experience. To stand authentically in those contradictions is to affirm your humanity rather than suppress it for the sake of fitting in. There is also an erotic dimension to authenticity. Experience. To be fully oneself in love is to bring vitality into the relationship. Desire does not thrive in the performance of what we think a partner expects, it thrives in the rawness of being real. Experience. When we conform too rigidly, intimacy becomes scripted, predictable, and lifeless. When we allow authenticity, intimacy becomes alive, unpredictable, and vibrant. Even in relationships that last only months, authenticity can create experiences of intensity and truth that echo for years. These encounters may not meet cultural standards of success, but they succeed in the most important way. Experience. They allow us to feel fully alive. Of course, authenticity carries risks. To live authentically often means disappointing others, family who worry, friends who project their own insecurities. Experience. Colleagues who measure you against societal milestones. It can also mean confronting your own doubts, the voices inside that whisper you should have done things differently. Experience. That you should be somewhere else by now. Conformity is seductive because it spares us these confrontations. It offers safety, approval, and the comfort of fitting into familiar categories. Experience. But safety at the cost of self is not freedom, and approval at the cost of truth is not love. Experience. The real challenge is not simply to reject conformity, but to embrace authenticity in a way that still allows for connection. Authenticity does not mean isolation. Experience. It means showing up in relationships as your true self and inviting others to do the same. It means creating bonds that are not defined by how they compare to cultural expectations, but by the intimacy, honesty, experience, and vitality they actually hold. Some of these bonds may be brief, others may be lasting, but their value lies not in their conformity, but in their truth. When you embrace authenticity over conformity, experience, you also offer others permission to do the same. You become a living reminder that there are many ways to live and love. Experience, that the measure of a life is not how closely it follows a script, but how fully it is lived. This does not erase longing or uncertainty. It does not eliminate the human desire for recognition and belonging. Experience, but it transforms the ground on which those desires rest. Instead of asking, do I measure up to the expectations placed on me? The authentic question becomes experience. Am I living in alignment with who I truly am?